So as Franca said, I'm a time hacker. For the past several years, I've been teaching teams at tech companies how to work smarter in today's information era. It's a new profession that I basically invented. So I'm basically one of the only people, well, few bunch of a group of people in the world teaching time hacking techniques. And my agenda and my values behind the techniques that I teach is that we want to use as much as we can our web tools in order to create much more offline moments. So it's shifting online tools in the service of offline moments. So that's what kind of stands behind everything I do. I'm one of those people who is very much integrated with technology, but very seldom will you see me around with my phone. I leave it in all kinds of places. I'm very disconnected as much as I can, although my desktop, my mobile, my tablet are very much, integrated with a lot of automations. So that's basically me putting that agenda into reality of being away from the devices as much as we can, without, of course, with being very, very productive and efficient in the way. Franca, you wanna?
No, please just carry on with your presentation. That's all fine.
Oh, you don't want to ask the questions that we?
No, I thought you just follow them through. Okay, I can. Okay, sure, I'll ask them. 1 second, I need to bring them up.
Suits you. I'm fine with carrying on with them.
Then I think it's a flow where it's just easier if you just carry on.
Sure. So Franca and I initially got prepared for this 1 hour because 1 hour is, of course, not enough time to give you a full essence of the entire time hacking techniques. I usually train teams for a full day. That can be split to separate sessions, but my entire content evolves around about 9 hours. So when we try to give one good condensed hour with some values to you guys, then we prepared 5 questions in advance. So I'm just gonna follow through those 5 questions that we prepared. As Franco said, you can use the chat to ask anything in addition. So I'm currently writing my book called High in Your Time, a survival kit for working and living in the digital era. Not available in stores yet, but soon, hopefully. And one of the questions Franca asked is really, what is the main principle that I can give to people when it comes to improving their efficiency? And the main value is HIME, which stands for high impact, minimal effort. It's a term that was used in the American Army, and I've borrowed it into the productivity field. And the idea that stands behind it is that in today's information era, if you really want to be efficient, you have to start scheduling your tasks to when they require the least amount of effort and give you the maximum impact. So it's very different from the way we grew up, most of us. We were bought on the notion that if you work hard and you sweat, then you will gain and be successful. But ever since 2009, when the digital era kicked into our lives, this notion, if it was true at all before, it is for sure not true today. If you work hard today and you sweat and you work long hours and you take yourself to the extreme, the only thing I can guarantee you is that you're going to be sick. In today's information era, you have to work differently. You have to seek to get to each and every one of your tasks to when they require the least amount of effort. And HIME is a very subjective term. We all have different HIMEs. So for example, when it comes to sports, for some people, it will be relatively easier to do their sports activity at 6 a.m. And for others, it will be relatively easier to do it in the afternoon. And for some crazy people, it's at 9 o'clock at night, you'll see them running in the park. For me, it's unbearable just to think of that hour for sports, but for some people, that's their high for sports. So we want to basically start aligning our communication preferences and our energy levels throughout the day to scheduling tasks in accordance to our own time. We want to understand ourselves better. When will it be easier for me to conduct my phone calls? For example, I group my phone calls together. I don't scatter them all day long. I just group them as much as I can. My planned, of course, phone calls. If the phone rings, I have no control over it, but I do have control over the scheduled phone calls. So I'll group them together, and then I'll have to assign them to a specific hour of the day. And my time for phone calls is around noon hours, because in the morning hours, it really would be a lot of energy for me to have, 10 phone calls in a row at 9 o'clock in the morning. Very, very difficult for me. But for my husband, for example, for him, like 7, 8 o'clock in the morning is his perfect time to have tons of phone calls. And by the time he gets to his office, he's got like half of his day already done with. So it's, like I said, very, very subjective. If we can get ourselves to align our day by 80%, 70-80% of our day to be aligned to our own time, then we can see great results in, productivity levels going through the roof. And then 20 to 30% of the day, we can adjust ourselves to other people's time, because of course we can never be 100% aligned to our own time. We do live in a group, and we have to, of course, be sensitive to that. But it's a matter of the ratio. How much of your time you're doing your tasks in accordance to your own time. Like I said, 70-80% is a good way to go. And then 30% of the time, you'll adjust yourself to others. So if someone asks to talk to me in the morning, I will, of course, initially try to schedule at noon. But if it's urgent and there's no other hour of the day, then sure, I'll do my phone calls in the morning if it's urgent and if it's needed. As long as it's not every day I'm doing my phone calls in the morning out of my time, then that's fine. I'll be able to carry on with a very energetic working day. So basically, what we want to get into the idea, and I know that if people are reading a lot about productivity online, there's lots of research saying 11 a.m. is your hour of the day. That's the best productive time. I have to admit that I don't align to those kinds of results or conclusions. I teach my clients to be productive all day long, but just for different things. So in the morning, you can be productive for working quietly on your emails. At noon, you can be productive to doing a group of phone calls and face-to-face meetings. And in the afternoon, you can be very productive for sports. And then in the evening, you can be very productive for reading. Whatever the tasks are, you want to be productive all day long, but by aligning those tasks to your time. And keep in mind that each task has a different time. So talking on the phone is different than face-to-face meeting, then virtual meetings, then Excel sheets, then presentations, preparing presentation slides needs a different time. Social media, writing documents, reading online and offline, it's a different time. So really split each and every one of your tasks and ask yourself, when would be the easiest time, the day and time, the easiest day and time of the week for me to try and approach this task and start. That would be your starting point. You can also align a team time, so you can have a conversation with your team saying, if we need to have a weekly meeting, let's just not just schedule it on Monday morning, just because Monday morning is the beginning of the week. Maybe that's not a good reason to schedule that weekly meeting then. But ask the team, maybe they'll say, wait, we'll be much better off with a meatless Monday, for example. Many of the clients do that. So it's a full day, no meetings, so people can clean and sort and empty their inboxes, their messaging, their tasks, softwares. They have a quiet day to work with ease, and then Tuesday noon will be a better time for them, perhaps, to have that weekly team meeting. So ask people before and get the group to 80% agree on the time that is best suits everyone, and then just 20% of the people need to give up on that time and make sure that they get it their way on other tasks. So before I move on, does anyone have a question about Haim? Okay. So another question that Franca asked me to approach was the question about tools. Which web tools do I need or do I use? Naturally, I use a lot of web tools and we can't get to every one of them right now. So I decided to put in this presentation a brief of how I use my tool for capturing content and keeping myself always up to date with my own profession or whatever other interests I have. So I use Pocket as my main tool for capturing information and keeping myself up to date. Pocket is a tool that you can capture content online, whether it's articles, podcasts, videos, PDFs. You can capture all those mediums, and you can then consume content later, because when we get a newsletter, that's not necessarily the time when we can read it, but if we capture the article we wanted on the Pocket, we can then consume it in a different time. If any of you is working in a profession where you have to read online material on the spot, then of course you can, like journalists, for example, or maybe people working in finances, they need to be up to date on the moment the information reaches them, then they can use an add-on called Mercury Reader, which basically just clears the article and gives you the plain text. It clears away all the banners and ads and all the hyperlinks going on a web page, so you can just consume the content with ease. But if you're like me and you want to consume it on a different time, then you can use one of those tools like Pocket. There's others. What I wanted to say is that it's very, very easy to download apps. It's a lot more difficult to put them into action, really integrate them into your system, use all their features, use them wisely, make automations so that it suits your workflows. That's the work. Downloading is really easy. I call it the unbearable lightness of downloading apps. It's really unbearably easy, but then the work starts. So I'll just approach one of the things you want to keep in mind when starting to work with an app like Pocket. The first thing, of course, is Haim. You want to understand when would be the best, easiest day and time of the week for you to be sitting down and reading content that you've captured all week long. And you want to understand, of course, if it's a weekly or a monthly thing that you're going to be doing. But either way, you have to have a calendar invite in your calendar that says Pocket. It has to have the name on it. Even if you're not going to be emptying your Pocket every week, which is, I empty it about once every 3 weeks. But I have a calendar invite that pops in my calendar every week, and I forward it to the week after. So I'm all the time reminded that I need to revisit my Pocket and empty it. So there's a calendar invite that needs to run in the back of that work. Third thing you want to keep in mind is the environment. So you have to make it fun, because consuming content can be really, a lot of information going in, and we're already overwhelmed with information as it is. So you want to make this activity fun. I use Pocket. You don't need Wi-Fi to read the articles. I can sit down at my porch. I can have my legs up. I can have my drink next to me. I'll have my notebook. So I'll really prepare the environment to make it a good, fun hour. That way my brain will remember it as a positive experience and will help me repeat this. And last but not least is choosing the right screen. So I warmly advise people to use the tablet for consuming content, not using the mobile phone. The screen in my eyes is way too small, and not using the PC, because when you're sitting in the office, so first of all, the environment is not right, because you're sitting in a chair. It's not that easy to sit down and just read. For me at least. Also, you'll be distracted, because on your PC, you've got, all your apps and work tools there, and you'll be easily distracted to check your emails and messages all the time. So in my tablet, I only have apps that have to do with with learning, with videos, with music, with content. I don't have social media. I don't have email. I don't have calendar on my tablet. So when I sit outside, I'm much less distracted. When you combine all this together, time and calendar and environment and the right tool, then when I sit out and I empty my pocket, I can scan through 50 articles an hour with ease, just because I made all that preparation and I thought through, how am I going to make this task of being up to date with my profession easy and fun? So I have my notebook next to me. I write down names of products, names of people, ideas, and quotes that I get out of the articles, and I erase. So Pocket is a very temporary place for content. You just want to archive things. It doesn't stay. So I pull out the information I need and I archive. But sometimes I want to keep the entire article because I want to forward to other people, because I want to send it to my clients, because I want to do something with the entire piece. Then I've automated that all my favorite items on Pocket, if I star an item, it will be automatically sent to my inbox. And then I can empty that article as well. After I start it, I can then archive it. So this is just an example of how to wisely use a web tool. Pocket is incredibly, I love that app. When you use a tablet, you can hover over hyperlinks and they can automatically be saved to your Pocket, so you don't have to click through another article when you're interested in it. You can just hover over the link, it will just automatically send it to save it. It reads articles to you, so you can listen to articles, not necessarily read. And it has this display settings. You can choose to read white over black. You can, which I think is much better for my eyes. You can enlarge the fonts. You can change the font. So you can really play around with the display settings. So again, making it a fun experience that will then be repeated again. So I think that's basically me explaining why downloading an app is by far just the first step of really making sense in it, making good use of it. So as I said, with automations, I use IFTTT for that automation of Pocket and Inbox. And naturally, you can use IFTTT for other automations as well. And there's other tools too for integrations, but this is a very, very friendly tool to use for first-time automations. So, any questions about Pocket before I move on to other things? Okay, if you're talking, I can see someone talking, but you're muted, so, okay. So, moving on, Franca asked me about how do I prioritize, how do I suggest people to prioritize? So I teach a method where the calendar is our main tool of work. Hi, questions before I move on? Okay. So I use the calendar as my main tool, but it doesn't mean that you're not supposed to be using any other CRMs or task management tools. Elroy, can you hear me? Yes?
Now we can hear you again, yes. We can hear you
now it's fine?
We didn't hear you for 30 seconds.
Okay. So it doesn't mean that the calendar should only be your tool for prioritizing your tasks. You can use any other tools, but I do warmly suggest that if you're using such a tool like Trello and you're following up on all your tasks through Trello, which is great, make sure you have in your calendar a Trello assignment that shows that for the next 2-3 hours, you're going to be working on Trello. You have to block that time in your calendar. Your calendar has to be blocked because otherwise you can be thinking to yourself that you're having a very easy day because there's nothing showing up in your calendar, while of course your Trello is packed up with tasks that's going to be keeping you busy all day long. So just if you're not following up on your tasks through your calendar and through a different tool, just make sure you're blocking that time to use that tool. And the way we prioritize is basically by procrastination. I'm a big fan of procrastination. And as you can see in the slide here, procrastination was defined in the ancient world as waiting for the right time. So I have this method where I just push things forward, and through that, I understand what are the tasks that I need to approach today by eliminating the ones that I don't need to be working on today. It doesn't mean that I'm only going to be working on the urgent stuff. I make sure that every day I also push through important, not urgent tasks. So when I eliminate all the things that I won't be doing today, the things that I'm going to leave in my calendar for today are a mixture of urgent things, but also important, not urgent tasks that need to get a little nudge and push every day. So eventually we can find time for them, because the important, not urgent tasks are the things we tend to let go, which is horrible because those are the things that are going to give us the most progress. I also advise people to prioritize their tasks with their teams constantly. We live now in a very dynamic world, and it isn't enough to prioritize your workday once a day in the morning. You have to approach your team and your boss every couple of hours, depending on where you work, but you have to make sure that your team knows exactly what you're going to be working on for the next few hours, because the reality changes very quickly. So make it a habit to communicate everything you're planning to do this week, today, and then the next half a day with your team all the time. Make it methodical on the way. And the last thing, of course, when it comes to prioritizing is the HIME. Once you kick your HIME into action, then you know what your tasks are for the day, and you know that you're going to be starting with that task, and then you're going to be going on to the other one. And the lineup is based on your own communication preferences and your energy levels, making sure you're always doing the thing that is the most easier, the easiest for you at any given moment. When you start working on that method of looking always for the easy way out of things, I know it sounds counterintuitive to what we were all taught, but trust me, it works. When you start aligning things to when it's easy, you have this real force that's pushing you, and you have energy throughout the day to go from one task to another. So that's another great tool to prioritize yourself. Always seek for the easy way out. How are we with time? Okay, we have time. Any questions before we go on?
Yeah, I have a question. So it seems like it's just a bunch of tools like Trello and Monday and Slack and email automation tools, and probably we'll go to Superhuman. So yeah, a lot of tools that everybody uses, but eventually all of those tools have like a learning curve. So for me, it's hard for me to find the time to start working with those products. So I'm feeling that even in Slack, the simplest product to use, and Monday, we're not reaching the right spot. And I actually believe in working like that. So if somebody is now seeing my notebook, this is my methodology. And yet it's hard for me to find time. Those tools, in my opinion, could be more time consumer in a small startup. In a big organization, you have to do it because you need to collaborate with information. But in a small organization, they are more time consuming, yet I can't find a way to manage my time better without them.
I totally agree. And I would say to you that it's not only in the smaller companies that too much tech is bad for you. Also in the big companies, they change the software, they change the tools all the time. Their teams are going crazy with the headache that it creates. And there's learning curve to each and every one of those tools. and you really need to integrate them wisely in order to make the best out of them. Otherwise, you're working really hard for them, you know? I'm sure everyone knows that feeling of working with a CRM, that you're working hard to help it give you reports. And when it does give you a report, you're like, I worked hard to get this report out of you. Well,
Exactly.
what's the ROI on this CRM? It's like that. So you're very, very right about your instinct saying too much tech is bad for you. And all these integration need to come sometimes instead, you know, not just in addition. You know, if you're adding WhatsApp or Slack, then maybe you should choose one of them. Basically, not Telegram, WhatsApp, and Slack all together as messaging, and Google Hangout and Microsoft Teams. And it's like people are going crazy, and they're all messaging systems. So definitely choose one.
Spaghetti system. Yeah, it's kind of a spaghetti systems, but eventually, if there is like few guidelines and tips, so like you started talking about, do all your phone calls in a batch and not in like grouping them, and so those kind of tips that are not relying on new and more technologies, because maybe it's just my opinion, but I believe that maybe others of the listeners, we don't have time now to start a learning curve of using Superhuman or Trello. Those are tools that take 2 weeks just to understand all of the features and what is the 20% you want to use.
Yeah, and even then they send updates. So even when you did learn something, then you need to get updates all the time because they change the software. It's a never-ending cycle, for sure. That's why when I decided to show Pocket to you, this is like a tool what you use to catch up on stuff, right? But I just wanted to examine and show how much time you have to put into making this tool work for you, so you can be up to date on everything that's happening around you with ease and not with sweat. Starting to say about grouping, so for sure, choosing to group similar tasks so that require the same amount of energy. So if you have to work on Excel sheets throughout the week, try to condense them into one day and schedule them on your Heim on that day for Excel sheets. Same goes for phone calls, for face-to-face meetings. Try to schedule them in advance, back-to-back, and limit it for half a day, or make it a full day of back-to-back meetings. In terms of your energy levels, you'll have a much better day that way, rather than splitting those meetings throughout the day and having time to work on your emails in between or your CRM. That's just going to exhaust you. So you don't want to create a day where you're just moving from task to another that is very different than the energy that it requires. So having a full day back-to-back meetings is much, much better. So definitely grouping tasks that have the similar energy, aligning them to your Heim, and creating a system where you postpone things, because we have to understand. I don't have the slide for it right now. I'll just say it up front, like verbally. We tend to overestimate what we can achieve in a week, and we tend to underestimate what we can achieve in a year. That's the way our mind grasps or doesn't grasp time. We have a problem with time issues in terms of the brain understanding time. So that the tendency is, our brain tendency is to overestimate what we can achieve in a week and underestimate what we can do in a year. And we have to work with that and work a way around it, knowing that if you haven't finished your task for the week, it's not your fault. It was just your brain not giving the right assumption of how much time you really have and how much time every task really takes. So being very forgiving to yourself about not being able to put up with all the lists that you've made and postponing them for next week or next month with ease and with grace and with compassion towards yourself. So whatever system you have currently with your notebook, just make sure that whenever you're postponing and procrastinating on stuff, you do it with forgiveness in the backwards, with the back of your mind towards that. I hope that kind of answers your question in the limits that we have of this 1 hour. Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So we talked about prioritization needing to be done on a all the time, basically. So the other question, Frank, I had for me was about distractions. How do you eliminate distractions? And distractions is a big thing because, as you tech people probably know, we're being distracted by design. So all the tech tools we're using are basically designed to get us distracted and get our attention immediately. And we got used to it. And tech companies know that very well, that our brain actually likes to be distracted. We get this dopamine hit out of it. And they're using that against us. So first of all, if you want to be less distracted, first understand that this is the mechanic that we're working against. This is the superpower that we're trying to overcome. Tech companies are using weaknesses or human weaknesses, and they're attacking them just, to get us to be more engaged with their products. So just by knowing that we're kind of victims to a system that we're currently working under is already helping you to be more focused than ever, because you understand that someone is messing up with your brain. So that's the first thing I have to say about distractions. The second thing I have to say is that sounds are very, very efficient when it comes to focusing. So there's different services. This is an example. The slide you see is Focus at Will. It's an example of, one second, excuse me. It's an example for a service that gives you a library of sounds, and you each have to find your own soothing sound that will get you into deep work. And it works like magic. So there's Focus at Will, there's Brain FM, there's sound libraries in Spotify, in iTunes, in all the music services. They all have library for sounds, and it's different than music, okay? And when you start listening to different sounds, you can very quickly decide which are the ones that are right for you, that ease your mind, and create your own short list. And you can put on your, headphones, like good headphones, when you have to approach a task that needs a lot of focus, and tune into the sounds that you chose. When I do that, when I need a very focused day, because I have lots of things to do and I only have 6-7 hours to work and I want to be really, really efficient, don't have times to read the news and anything that, I put on the headphone, I put the sounds on, and I forget to get up. I literally work 3-4 hours straight and I just forget to get up. So it works really well. So finding the right sounds for you is a great way to find focus. And another habit that I teach, one second. Another habit that I teach to get yourself into more of a focused environment, is to be less obsessed about checking messages and emails out of the fear that something urgent might pop up in one of those tools. A lot of people, because everyone is so available today and everyone works 24/7, a lot of people around you might be thinking that if they text or email you something urgent, you will definitely see it. So we want to basically have a conversation with our clients, with our team, with our boss, with our friends, with our family, and to explain to them that if they need you urgently within, if they need your response in the next hour or two, they can for sure email and text you, but they have to accompany it together with a phone call. Get them to call you and say, I just emailed you something urgent, please, I need your response. That's fine, but don't get in the habit of sending me urgent stuff to my email thinking that I will be 24/7 checking my emails. So what we'll be doing with that is basically creating a buffer for us to not be responsive and obsessively check on emails and WhatsApp all the time. And in that buffer zone, we can think, we can create, we can push through important, not urgent tasks. We can basically find ourselves a lot more focused and less distracted, just because we're not operating out of the fear of something urgent coming up in one of the tools that we've been using. And people do forget to pick up the phone these days. We really do a lot of things with the device. Calling people is not one of them. So we want to get into the habit of that. You can tell people, if you're sending me an email, just know that my response rate is an average of 48 hours. You know, you can be very graceful with yourself. You can say to people, if you're texting me, my response hour, average response time is 6 hours. If you need me any less than that, call me or email me, but call me first telling me that you've just emailed me something, like I said. So I call this process predefining urgency, talking to the circles around you and talking to them about what is urgent and what do we do when something urgent pops up. What is urgent is a very different definition for every company. For some companies, something urgent, something happens, it's something that needs to happen in the next hour. In other companies, it's something that needs to happen by the end of the day. And in others, it's something that needs to happen next week. And that's defined as urgent. So we need to talk and see what is urgent and what do we do when something urgent pops up. And once we have that communication in line, then we created that buffer for us to focus and work with quietness in our brain and not be obsessively checking emails all the time. And we get people to cooperate with us by showing them what's in it for them. So you want to explain to your boss the win-win situation that he needs to call you whenever he sends you something urgent, because you can explain to them that by doing that, you're creating a buffer for you to push forward on the quarterly objectives or next year's plans, and you can already find time to push them now if he can agree to call you whenever he needs something urgent and not assume that you're going to be checking all the time on your different platforms to see if if he needs anything from you. I'm happy to take questions on this. And another thing is to get us less distracted is the D&D mode. So I don't know, maybe some of you have used the D&D mode in our phone. It's the do not disturb. The default setting of do not disturb is that anyone on your favorite contact list can reach you when you're on a D&D mode, and anyone who calls you twice, because that's the sign of something urgent. So regardless of whether he's on your favorite list or not, if he calls you twice, he'll get through to you. So you can definitely sit around with your, pocket tool, for example. If you're reading stuff, you can put the D&D on, and you can quietly focus and not be distracted, knowing that anything that is urgent will get through to you. Okay, so I'm moving on to our last subject of the day. So people, if you have questions, make sure to write them in the chat. And the last question Franca had for me had to do with work-life balance. How do I suggest to balance between work and personal life? So what you first need to realize is that private life, or a flourishing private personal life, isn't a luxury, it's actually a necessity. If you want to succeed at work, you have to make sure you're having a flourishing personal life. And I'll explain to you right now why it is like that. But first of all, you have to shift that mode in your brain where having time for sports and relationships and theater and demonstrations and friends and time for myself and time for reading books, that's all a luxury that some people may have. No, it's a necessity. And I will explain to you right now why and how it's going to contribute immensely to your professional life as well. So Europeans know that, by their culture, they have a flourishing leisure time set up in Europe. You can see it, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, everyone's out and about. And there's also a new law. For example, there's several new laws. One of them just kicked in France 2 years ago about the right to disconnect, with a law that ensures that employers can't expect their employees to work after work hours just because tech allows us to. So it ensures people have the right to disconnect. And the French people and other European countries don't do that just for the sake of being nicer to their citizens. They're also doing it because they know that it contributes immensely to the profits of the company. When her employees go out and make sure they are healthy and make sure they are happy in their life, they get back to work energized, and they tend to be less sick, and they tend to not quit so often, and they tend to be having better ideas for the company. So it's actually profiting the company to make sure people have flourishing personal lives. And then science kicked in several years ago to prove that point. So if it was only in the level of a cultural thing, now it's like scientifically proved. So I'm really, really happy to be sharing this with you, because I think what I'm about to say now is going to really help you make that shift in your mind, and improve them, really. So what science has discovered is that we have an area in the brain called the frontal lobe, which is just behind our foreheads. And that's the area in the brain that is in charge of all our innovative thinking, creative thinking, insights, ideas, personal development, business development. All that stuff comes up in our frontal brain. And the frontal lobe kicks into optimal performance, like 100%, only under one condition, and that is what you see on the screen. Our frontal lobe kicks into optimal performance only when we daydream or gaze, when we just look out the window, when we just stare at the horizon, okay? When we're just daydreaming, not looking at anything, not trying to think of anything, that's when your frontal lobe kicks into optimal performance. So sitting all day in front of a screen means you're not operating the most important part of your brain. And what happened is that over time, 2009, the digital transformation era officially began in 2009. And we all realized that those little moments we once had for daydreaming are gone, because, you know, everyone, if you're waiting in line, if you're waiting for a friend in a restaurant, if you're just having coffee, before screens, before smartphones, you would just daydream because you had nothing else to do, and that was just the default. Today, we all, you know, get lost like this in some social feed whenever we have a spare minute, meaning we never kick in that frontal lobe into optimal performance, because we're always getting our brain engaged with more and more content. So we're not allowing our brain to process information. When we do allow our brain to process information, then it can provide those insights and those breakthrough ideas that will then make things happen for us much easier and much quicker if we'll just allow the brain to process information. And this is what happens when you have a personal life. When you go out and you ride your bike and you do your sports, you meet with people, you have time for yourself, you have time to read a book, you're processing basically your life in your brain, and you can then get to some amazing breakthroughs that you can't if you're all day sitting in front of your screen in the office. So what I suggest, to be very methodical about the way we daydream and allow ourselves to do it at least 3 times a day. So my advice to you is write down in your notebook 3 opportunities that you can try and daydream instead of getting lost in some social feed. Like really to hold yourself, to resist the urge of checking on another social feed, and use that coffee break or waiting in line or waiting for a friend, use that time for processing information and daydreaming. So write down 3 opportunities through the day that you can try and start to consciously start working on that. And when you do have that coffee break where you plan to daydream, then I warmly advise that you work with a timer. You set up a timer on your mobile phone for the time you have. Let's say you have 10 minutes for your coffee break. That way you won't be late for your next meeting. And you can then 100% be focused and concentrate and allow yourself to daydream because you're not afraid to be late. And along that timer, also make sure you have your capturing tool next to you, whether it's a notebook or a mobile app, whatever capturing tool you're using, have it open and available next to you. Because while you be doing that processing, while you be doing that daydreaming, your brain will process information and will give you lots of things to think about. And you just want to drop them into the capturing tool so you can allow your brain to only process information and not hang on to information. So you're not operating the memory part of the brain. So drop everything that comes, 10 minutes, just drop and drop and drop. If anything comes in, you just write it down. And after the time is up, or after you've realized that you've processed everything, that your brain is now relaxed, then you can go on with your day and operate on the things that you've captured in that processing time. When you do that at least 3 times a day, every day, you will find, I just meet a lot of people who complain about not being able to go to sleep or not, sleeping problems. If you do that 3-4 times a day, you'll see that your sleeping is actually improving, or at least falling asleep is much easier than it was before. Because in today's information era, what happens to many people is that they don't ever process, they don't stop to process information. So the minute they put their head on the pillow, their brain has got the first time of the day his opportunity to process information, because all the time he was engaged with information. All of a sudden he can process, and then he keeps us awake for another hour and a half. So when you methodically do those breaks and you daydream throughout the day, you'll get to sleep better and faster. So I hope that by that, I just gave you an incentive to find more time for personal life, knowing that it's a key contribution to your successful career. So it goes hand in hand with your energy levels and your insights and your time-shortening laughs that you can make by taking the time to daydream. I have a nice article. In this slide, you can see one of my mentors that I adore, Abraham Hicks. I follow her for several years now. She has a whole manifest about why doing less and imagining more will get you to higher places. I also have an article under the same headline in my blogs that you can read. And you can have my contact details and reach me if you'd like to learn more about time hacking. And I'm happy to take questions if you have. I'm available.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good day. Go ahead and relax your brain.
Thank you so much.
See you around.
Thank you, Batchen.
Thank you.
Make time for democracy, yeah? Fight for democracy.
We will. Bye.
Okay.
Thank you very
I
much.
count on that.
Thanks for the wonderful tips.
Happy to help.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Elroy?
Hey, Batchen, I'm still with you. I'm still here.
אוקיי, שאני אעשה ליב או שאתה רוצה להגיד משהו?
רק תודה רבה על הזמן שלך, היה מעולה, ואנחנו, כמובן, אנחנו לוקחים את הרקורדים, שולחים את זה גם לכל השאר החבר'ה שלא ראו את זה, אז אולי יהיה להם שאלות, אם כן, אני אעשה לך פולו.
מעולה. יש לפרנקה את המצגת עצמה, אז היא יכולה גם לשלוח את זה למי שאתה שולח לו את הרקורדינג, שיהיה להם גם את המצגת עצמה, ואני אשמח גם לקבל את הרקורדינג.
אין בעיה.
Hi.
Hi, Franca.
How was it?
You weren't with us?
No. Sorry, I had to multitask. I'm not sure if you covered that, but today I had to multitask. It's a crazy day.
Yeah, I have a whole chapter about why multitasking is not good for you, but I haven't spoken about it today. So
Yeah, I know this. This is also why I actually did multitask and I didn't listen to you.
Yeah, we can't. Our brain,
I will
there's only
listen to the
2%.
recording, so.
They say there's only 2% in the population that can actually do two things at once. All the rest, 98% of us, we can only monotask, but we switch rapidly between tasks.
Yes,
So
exactly. No, but it was really great. I am looking forward to listening to the full recording. And thanks so much for making the time. I will send you the recording. And really, I really appreciate it that we did it now for the hour. It was really great. Thank you.
I'm happy.
Thanks,
We'll be in touch.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
Franca, can you stay for 1 second? Or, she left.